Has America outsourced its foreign policy to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu? Is Netanyahu calling the shots, as some are suggesting? That's a very important question because America has Israel is a long-standing ally of the United States, long-standing friend through decades of time together. But America has its national interest. Israel has its national interest, and when they align, then that's actually a good thing for the United States to be working in there. But if those things defer, if there's a divergence in those interests, then it's important that the United States look after the interest of the United States, just like Israel will look after its interests when they diverge as well. And we're going to see that that is what Israel is doing, and they have no problem doing that. The question is, does America not have a problem with having a different policy when our interests diverge? That's to help us understand that question. We have a friend of the show here, Professor Omer Bartov, who is a genocide studies at Brown University, former IDF officer, and just a regional expert in the area. And welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Always great to have your insights here because you've got, information that, that a lot of our American readers and viewers don't have because you live there. You've used to patrol in some of these areas as an officer of the IDF. So you've got an insight that I think not many of us have. And so we're very grateful to have it. And let's just jump right in there on that topic of what happens when two friends and allies have diverging opinions. Now, it's been pretty clear from Netanyahu, and we're going to show you here in just a second, that he is sharply focused on what he views as the needs of the Israeli state and what he needs to do as prime minister to take care of that, even if it diverges from the United States. Here's what he said in terms of what their objectives are. Back in, I guess it was earlier this month. And just to set the stage here, this was in context of the president of the United States saying that he wanted a two-state solution. Many of our senior officials have said that. And Netanyahu was basically saying, yeah, not so much.
And therefore, I clarify that in any other arrangement, in the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose on us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends. To say no when you need to and to say yes when you can.
So he wants to say yes to all the stuff that he gets from us, but no when it comes to a diverging interest on that. Now, he said it just a couple of days ago, actually in response to the ICJ ruling against Israel, or at least the initial ruling. We'll talk about that in a second. You can tell us what's really going on with that. But he is, again, pretty emphatic on saying where he stands.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it. On the eve of the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I again pledge as Israel's prime minister, never again.
Now, Professor, he makes that never again statement, which resonates really strongly in American national security or American population, and obviously even more so within the Jewish population in Israel. But when he's referring specifically to the vile suggestion that Israel not have an ability to defend itself, I don't think that's a very fair characterization on what that ruling actually is. And since this is an area of your expertise there at Brown University, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what this ruling actually said and what Netanyahu's position is, and do they line up?
Well, there's a lot here. First of all, you mentioned the issue of national interest, and I would say that there are cases, of course, that national interests diverge. In this case, I would say that Netanyahu is actually working against Israel's national interest. It's not only that he's working against America's national interest, and we can talk further about that. Secondly, in terms of international law, when Netanyahu says that Israel has the right to defend itself, of course he's right, but when he talks about Israel being the country between the river and the sea, then that is not the case, because Israel is in breach of international law as an occupier of those parts. The West Bank and Gaza are not part of Israel according to international law. When you talk about the ruling by the ICJ, Netanyahu has called it outrageous that Israel is being brought to the ICJ for potential charges of genocide. I find what the most outrageous part of this is that Israel, under his leadership, has brought itself to a position that the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, can say that there's a plausibility, it hasn't ruled on that yet, but there's a plausibility that Israel is in breach of the Convention on Genocide. That is a result of Netanyahu's own policy, and that could have been prevented. And so in that sense, he is the most responsible person for Israel being in that position right now.
Wow, that's a pretty eye-opening statement for a lot of people to think that, wait, the Israeli prime minister is himself working against the interests of his country. And now when we see that, this comment we just saw put up on the board there was immediately after this, a number of nations, one of which was the United States, suspended funding for the very country or the organization in the UN that helps oversee some of this stuff. Do you know anything about that situation? What was behind it? And is it a valid concern to, or is it valid for the United States and these other countries to withhold funding from that UN agency?
It is a valid concern. I mean, UNRWA is an organization that was put together right after 1948, when a vast number, the vast majority of the Palestinians who were living in what became the State of Israel became Palestinians, about 750,000 of them. Originally, it was supposed to help refugees, and the idea was that they would either return or be resettled elsewhere. But it is true that this is the only case in which not only the refugees themselves, but their children, grandchildren, whole generations have been taken care of by this organization since 1948 as refugees, although quite a number of them are also citizens of other countries, such as Jordan. So this is one sort of anomaly, and it has to do with the fact that Palestinians would want and insist to return to their own lands. The second problem is that there has been evidence that certainly in Gaza, people who work for UNRWA, for this UN organization, which employs mostly Gazans, mostly the local population, have also worked with Hamas. That's not the role of a UN organization to work with a group that the United States itself has recognized as a terrorist group. So there is a serious problem there. I think that the solution to withdraw funds from UNRWA is highly problematic because we now know that about 85% of the population of Gaza is in dire need of humanitarian support, and much of that support is being provided via UNRWA.
Now, let me ask. So it seems obviously that's not news. Everyone has been aware of that from the beginning, and the fact that the funding was withheld now seems pretty carefully calculated to be seen as a punishment for the fact that this ruling has come down. But the question that I want to ask is, because I don't know, is because I understand that that Hamas is not just a militant organization, but they were also the infrastructure, the political and administrative infrastructure. And do you know to what extent UNRWA was working with that just because that's the only game in town that they have to work with? Or is it they're doing things that they really shouldn't have done and worked with even the militant side of that? To what extent have they been working with them?
Well, look, I mean, I can only rely on what I've seen in the media. It appears that a number of UNRWA employees participated in the massacre of October 7th. This is apparently a very small number, but that others were also associated with Hamas. You are right to say that if Hamas is the main political organization in Gaza, then UNRWA has to work with them. But it's also true, UNRWA takes care of education, not only that is of schools, not only of social issues, and those schools have been used also for militant education of Palestinian children. So it is an anomaly. I would say that you're right to say that this has been brought up now, likely because Israel and some of its supporters elsewhere are trying to say they don't want to work with that. They want to put pressure on the Palestinian population so as to put pressure on the international community and on Hamas. But UNRWA itself probably has to look at to clean up its game quite seriously.
Yeah, either that or be replaced by somebody else. I mean, if they've been doing those things as accused, then yeah, that's a violation of law, and that should be taken into consideration. It should be addressed and fixed.
Correct.
But as you say, the near-term issue right now is that there is already an acute need among the Palestinian population, and this would seem to be the worst time to do that, especially if there's not an alternative immediately available to replace that aid for the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, that's not the only problem that the Palestinian people have right now, because not only did Netanyahu say in those clips we just showed that basically he's not interested in a two-state solution. We had one of Netanyahu's cabinet members, a guy named Ben Gvir, at a rally over the weekend that was talking about how actually what they need to do is to get rid of all the Palestinians. He said this.
את קידום פתרון של עידוד ההגירה של תושבי עזה אנחנו חייבים לקדם. זה פתרון נכון, צודק, מוסרי, הומני. יש אישים ברחבי העולם שאנחנו יכולים לקדם איתם את הרעיון הזה. עידוד הגירה של תושבי עזה יאפשר לנו להחזיר הביתה את תושבי העוטף ואת תושבי גוש קטיף.
Okay, sorry, that actually he was said on January 1st. He said that before, but he did speak at this rally over the weekend. Mm-hmm. A number of other figures did as well, where they're saying that they want to bring Israeli settlers back in and have the voluntary relocation of all the Palestinians. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and how that could even work? And is there any prospect that that would happen?
Well, what they want to do is transfer, or if you like, ethnic cleansing. This is their plan. It has been their plan for a long time. These are very extreme elements in Israeli politics, and they've been around for quite a while. The only difference is that they're now in the government, and that the government now has brought the army to Gaza. The army did not go to Gaza. Many of the soldiers in the army did not go to Gaza to do that. They were told that they were going there to remove Hamas, which had carried out a massacre. But now it turns out that these elements in the government are pushing now to use that opportunity to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to transfer the population for so-called humanitarian reasons, and those reasons were created by the presence of the military there, of the IDF there, to transfer them elsewhere, and then to settle it with Jewish settlers who were removed originally in 2005. And so the problem is these people are in government. If you add to that the fact that Israel now had been brought to the ICJ as a defendant and has to report within a month on whether it is in breach of the Genocide Convention, and that this, such an action would put it in breach of the Genocide Convention because it would be an attempt to destroy in whole or in part the Palestinian population, then yes, this is a very serious problem for the Israeli government. And Netanyahu has refused to say anything against what had just been pronounced by his own minister at this rally yesterday.
Well, that's kind of the question I wanted to have is to what extent does one of the ministers speak on behalf of the prime minister? And if he didn't like that, Netanyahu, seems like he would have had every opportunity to say so or to ask him to stop talking. Obviously, this has been a consistent statement from Ben Gvir and several others And obviously this was attended by quite a lot of people over the weekend, and with lots of pictures and celebrations and music. And so a lot of people in Israel seem to believe this, but I know that there's equal numbers, or I think there's equal numbers of Israeli citizens that don't think that that's the case and don't think they should do that. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about I guess the makeup of the Israeli population as a whole, and how the different sides are viewing this situation. And is there any prospect for a negotiated settlement even within the Israeli population?
Well, let me say first, I mean, the reason that Israel was actually brought to the ICJ was statements by various ministers, including Ben-Gvir himself, that appeared to be genocidal. And Israel's defense at the ICJ was to say that these are marginal figures and they're not decision makers. But they keep talking, and Ben-Gvir kept talking himself. So this is a kind of vicious circle that we're seeing. Do they represent the majority of the public? No, I don't think they do. I think that the majority of the Israeli public has no interest in resettling the Gaza Strip or in removing the population of Gaza. There is support in Israel at the moment. It may be waning, but there is support in Israel for the operation in Gaza, but not for this. As I say, the problem is that these people are in government, and this government is not going away. It's still there. Is there a way to resolve this issue? Yes, there is a way, but it can't be accomplished with this government. So the only way to change this paradigm is for the United States government to create conditions that would force the Israeli government either to change its policy, or for Netanyahu to face the issue, to bring it to his cabinet. It will probably make his cabinet fall, and to go for elections. But with this cabinet, with Netanyahu in charge of this cabinet, which is full of extremists, which is not representative of the majority of the Israeli public, there is no way that we can come out of this mess.
And is there a way within the Israeli form of government, which I don't understand that deeply, and I know a lot of Americans don't either, because I keep hearing stories and headlines that Netanyahu's days are numbered, that he's very unpopular within Israel, among the population at large, and that at some point he's going to lose, I don't know if it's the right term is lose confidence or lose support, but that he would then be replaced. By what means can that happen? Is there like a scheduled next set of elections that he has to worry about, or can something happen in the meantime that can bring his government to an end and be replaced? How does that work in your country?
So it's a parliamentary system, and elections won't happen in the next 3 years. So he has plenty of time if he goes by the schedule of elections. But there can be, and there have been, votes, non-confidence votes. There is a thing called a constructive non-confidence vote, which means that you vote against the government and you propose a different prime minister. But they have not had the majority in parliament. He has 64 members of Knesset out of 120. So you need 61 members of Knesset to vote against the government and to propose a different and alternative prime minister. His own party, a little bit like the Republican Party, has no spine. There are many people there who think that his policy is terrible, but they don't want to lose their voters. They're afraid of then going to elections, and the opinion polls say that his party will be completely destroyed in the elections, which means that these members of Knesset will no longer have a role. And so they're waiting. So the only other way to bring that about is by pressure on the Israeli government to act in a way that his own cabinet will refuse to do. And Netanyahu cannot afford to go directly against the United States government. There has been already noise just in the last few days that the administration is considering to limit the supply of munitions, which I think is a very, very good thing. He cannot afford that. But if he listens to what he's being told, right now there is a deal being hashed, hopefully, that for exchange of hostages. The reports are coming in today. That would mean a lengthy ceasefire. His own cabinet is vehemently opposed to that. Those same people, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, those radicals, are opposed to it. If he goes against it, and most of the Israeli public wants, first of all, for the hostages to come back. That's the most important thing generally in the Israeli public. So he has to decide, does he go against his cabinet and risk losing his government? Or does he go against the will, both of the Israeli public and of the Americans who are negotiating this? And that may bring about an election that would come much earlier, hopefully this summer. And that's what people are talking about, that hopefully by June, there could be an election, but he's going to lose it. Under the current opinion in Israel, he will lose it.
I see. Well, that's a very interesting development, something we're going to continue to keep an eye on here. But kind of along those lines, it appears to me, in my estimation, my analysis is that Netanyahu is pursuing a military strategy designed to achieve a political outcome that cannot be met, which is he wants to destroy Hamas so that Israel can live in peace. But in so doing, at least the way that they've conducted it, they have killed so many innocent Palestinian people that now then the number of enemies that are hostile to Israel are far more than there were probably on the 6th of October than there were after that. So now then by continuing to kill so many people, he makes it less likely that Israel's going to have peace. And I think that was illustrated in this little clip I'm going to show you here of a woman called Afa Gatasha, who is a Palestinian woman who lives in the Strip and does not like Hamas, as she does not hesitate saying here.
Afaf Qatasha, a women's rights activist.
وأختلف مع حماس اجتماعيا وأختلف مع حماس فكريا وأختلف مع حماس ديمقراطيا ولكن أتفق مع حماس على برنامج المقاومة وأتفق مع حماس أننا شعب تحت الاحتلال ولنا 75 عام يجب أن ينتهي هذا الاحتلال هيك ببساطة.
So there's a lot of people that didn't like Hamas, and probably a lot, even more, who don't like them now because of the actions which spurred a lot of this attack. But they also were aware that even though Hamas did this horrible thing that they did, it's still Israeli bombs and missiles that are wiping out large sections of their city and making life virtually impossible to live beyond whenever this war does come to an end. So the question that I have is Netanyahu making matters worse for Israel, not better? Because I'm guessing she's not the only one that feels this way.
No, I think many people feel that way. That is, they support Palestinian resistance to occupation, to Israeli occupation, and they don't support Hamas as such. And now there are many Palestinians also in the West Bank who support Hamas because it seemed to be the only organization that is fighting quite successfully against the IDF. Look, I mean, I think that your evaluation of Netanyahu is a bit too kind. I don't think that Netanyahu wants to bring peace. I think Netanyahu right now wants to keep the war going. For him, the minute the military action ends, he is an extremely unpopular political leader, and pressures will mount for him to resign. Simply because of the tremendous fiasco, of October 7th, that he's directly responsible for, and second, for the fiasco of the Israeli operation in Gaza, 3 months of fighting, killing thousands of Palestinians, hundreds of Israeli soldiers killed, and the two main goals of destroying Hamas and releasing the hostages have failed.
Been met.
And he is the man in charge. So what he says constantly on the Israeli media is, we will investigate all of this when the war is over. He does not want the war to be over. He wants to keep it going.
Doesn't want that.
This is his goal. Now, I would say, and it's very important to understand this, as I said before, Netanyahu right now is working actually against the national interests of Israel itself. That is, as long as this war goes on, the way he is conducting it, Israel is becoming weaker and not stronger. It's losing support in the United States. It's losing support in Europe, and it's losing support among Arab countries that want to actually have peace with it. And
Now,
so at
yeah,
the end of this war, it will be a weaker country whenever that war ends.
yeah, that's added on top of the other things that I was just talking about here. So you just listed a couple of ways that this is not working in Israel's position, things that are going bad. But I think that there's the third one with this ICJ ruling, and that's being viewed and really harming Israel's view and standing in credibility and reputation around the Western world, not just in the Middle East. And I found this interesting comment by Marwa Bishara from Al Jazeera as a pretty good commentary on how this looks from the American perspective.
American Biden administration has proven to be delusional when it comes to what Israel has been doing, and its attempt at shielding Israel diplomatically has also proven to be counterproductive. Now that the World Court have come out with its ruling, the United States and other Western backers of Israel's genocide must cease and desist.
Well, we'll see if they must desist and actually doing it are separate things here. But I want to look at two factors. First of all, as someone who works in genocide studies, does this ruling have merit? First of all,
well, there hasn't been a ruling. What there has been are provisional measures, and that was what South Africa asked for. And provisional measures by the ICJ are issued on the plausibility of the charge. They haven't ruled on this, and they probably won't rule for years. It takes a very long time to investigate all this. So whatever is happening now in Gaza will hopefully by then be long over. So these are provisional measures, but issuing provisional measures because of merit, that is, because of the ongoing violence and the danger of things deteriorating, is important as such, because it says there is plausibility to the argument that Israel may be either conducting genocide or is on the verge of genocide. That as such is very important. Then the measures themselves are important. They include that Israel ensures that it is not in breach of the Genocide Convention, neither the government nor the military.
So if you could educate us, what does legally constitute a genocide? I mean, Israel has one view, the ICJ has another, or South Africa has another. But what, just even according to the law, what does genocide equal?
Well, the Genocide Convention speaks about genocide as being the intention, carrying out acts with the intention of destroying in whole or in part a national, religious, or ethnical group. So it has two elements. One element is that there is an intention to destroy a group as such. And secondly, that this intention is being implemented in an attempt to destroy a group, not simply members of the group, but members of the group as members of that group specifically. So it does not depend necessarily on the numbers, although the assumption is that they would be large, but on why those people are being killed or deprived of means to sustain life. This is the definition itself. And the International Court of Justice is the UN institution that can determine whether it believes that genocide is occurring or there's a danger of genocide occurring. It cannot enforce its decisions. That would go to the Security Council. That's the enforcement agency. As we know, in the Security Council, the permanent members have veto power, and the US is one of them. So it may issue a veto. This would also be, however, with the provisional measures. So if the ICJ receives a report, as it asked for, in a month's time from Israel, that it has carried out the measures expected, and the ICJ says, well, you have not, then it can send that to the Security Council. And if the Security Council says that Israel is in breach of these measures, then it can issue all kinds of decisions, such as sanctions on Israel.
And how long might it take to get to that point where they might issue an administrative or an initial?
Well, the ICJ called upon Israel to produce a report within a month to show that it is following the provisional measures, which include, by the way, no more incitement by Israeli political figures to genocide. Exactly what happened yesterday. So Israel is already in breach of that, and the prime minister has not said anything against it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Speaking of the prime minister, so in that clip, I believe that one of the first ones that we showed on this show here, Netanyahu emphatically says, we're doing everything we can to minimize civilian casualties, and we're being very careful about it. And so that would seem to undercut the one of the legs there that you mentioned, where it has to be the intentional targeting. Now, if you don't want to look at anybody's words and you just look at what's happening, you can go, yeah, that looks a lot like it's intentional to me. It doesn't look like it's, so collateral damage, so to speak. From your perspective, with the experience that you have and the studies that you've made, how does this stack up to you? Is it genocide or is it not?
Look, I mean, I've been talking and thinking about it since the beginning now for 3 months. My view is that if the ICJ were now to make a decision on the basis of what we are seeing now, that it would not rule that it's genocide. My own sense is that what we are seeing now, or how we understand what we are seeing now, will be much clearer within the next few weeks. That is that Israel has created a situation at the moment where the vast majority of the Palestinian population of Gaza is in a very small part of the Gaza Strip, in a severe humanitarian crisis, and much of its homes, the infrastructure, is being destroyed. And so what happens next? If there is a quick resolution of this, if there's an international agreement that enables the IDF to leave, an international force to move in, and commitments by international powers to rebuild this area, and a return of that population to where it came from, then you could say, well, we were close to genocide, but it didn't happen, or we were close to forcible displacement. If it doesn't happen, and if the death rate climbs, and it is climbing now, among those people, among those 2 million displaced people, or if they're removed from that area entirely, then you could say, now we know that that was the intention from the beginning. That is, that what happened was intentional. So it really depends on the next few weeks. And that depends, I think, again, very importantly, on international involvement, and particularly on the U.S. administration.
Yeah, you mentioned a minute ago that a lot of the Israeli politicians are weak backbone. They don't want to take any action. We have a whole slew of them over on this side, just across town from where I'm at, unfortunately. And I'm afraid that might include the White House, because, man, I think that a lot of people could be saved if we find a backbone, but it remains to be seen whether that's going to happen. But we are so grateful for you to come on to give us some clarity on this kind of stuff, because it really has helped me to understand a lot better what's going on, and I hope for our audience too. So thank you very much for coming on today, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we'll continue to keep our eye on this, because unfortunately this is not going anywhere. And as Professor Bartov just mentioned there, that probably within the next few weeks, this is going to get to a new position here, and it could go either direction. And for the sake of the Palestinian people and for the future security of Israel, I pray that that happens quickly. Thank you for coming and joining on us today. We are going to continue to be unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you all the information that you need to make sense of your life. We ask you to like and subscribe, and look forward to seeing us tomorrow with Tony Schaefer on Deep Dive. I know he's a fan favorite of a lot of yours, and you'll not want to miss that show. Thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.